It was Christmas Eve, and the mountains were cloaked in a thick blanket of snow. Emma had been driving through the winding roads, determined to reach her sister's cabin in time for the holiday, when the storm hit far worse than she had expected. The sky darkened, the wind howled, and snowflakes struck her windshield with a force that made her squint to see the road ahead. Her car struggled against the ice, tires skidding on the slick surface, and panic began to creep in. She realized she was completely alone, with no cell signal in the nearest town miles away. The thought of spending the night, exposed to the freezing cold, sent shivers down her spine, even under her thick coat. As her car slid dangerously close to the edge of a snow-covered embankment, Emma knew she couldn't go on. She pulled over, wrapping her arms around herself to keep from shivering, and stared out at the endless white that stretched in every direction. Her teeth chattered, and the wind seemed to cut straight through her, carrying with it a biting chill that threatened to sap her strength. She closed her eyes, fighting back tears, and tried to steady her breathing. She had never felt more helpless. Just as despair was about to overwhelm her, she saw a faint glow in the distance, a warm, flickering light that cut through the storm. With renewed hope, she climbed back into the car and, with painstaking care, drove toward it, praying that someone was home. The snow made the journey treacherous, and every mile felt like an eternity. When she finally reached the house, her hands were numb and her face burned from the cold. She pounded on the heavy wooden door, her knuckles raw, and waited, heart pounding. The door opened to reveal a tall man with a rugged, weathered face and eyes that seemed to see right through her fear. His expression softened immediately when he saw how cold and exhausted she was. Without a word of judgment, he stepped aside and gestured her inside. The warmth from the house enveloped her instantly, and she felt the icy tension in her body begin to melt. Luke, the rancher, offered her a steaming mug of cocoa and a thick blanket. For the first time that night, she felt safe, and a small spark of something unfamiliar, a sense of comfort, perhaps even hope, tugged at her heart. She realized that this stranger's kindness might just be the miracle she needed on the coldest Christmas Eve of her life. The blizzard showed no signs of letting up, and Emma found herself trapped in the ranch longer than she had expected. At first, she tried to keep to herself, retreating to a corner of the cozy living room with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, sipping the cocoa Luke had handed her. But the warmth of the house and the steady rhythm of his presence slowly chipped away at her walls. She watched him move around the room with quiet confidence, stacking firewood, checking on the animals outside through the frosted windows, and tending to small chores with a care that was almost mesmerizing. Luke didn't seem like someone who sought attention, yet he had a way of making Emma feel seen. He asked her about her journey, listened when she spoke, and laughed at the small, nervous jokes she made to keep from thinking about the cold outside. His voice had a steady, calming quality, and she found herself leaning in, eager to hear more, to share more. It was strange. She had always been independent, never relying on anyone, yet here she was, feeling a connection that seemed to grow with every passing hour. The afternoon passed with soft laughter, clinking cups, and the occasional crackle of the fireplace. Emma learned about Luke's life on the ranch, the long hours, the solitude, and the quiet satisfaction of working with the land. He didn't dwell on loneliness, but she could see traces of it in his eyes, hidden behind his warm smile. She shared stories of her own, tales of her bustling city life, her family, and the little joys and frustrations she carried with her. Each story, each shared glance seemed to pull them closer together. By evening, the snow had piled high outside, the world beyond the ranch reduced to a blur of white. They found themselves sitting by the fire, the glow illuminating their faces, hearts quietly acknowledging the unspoken bond forming between them. Emma realized that the fear she had felt on the road had melted away, replaced by something she didn't expect: hope, trust, and the first delicate stirrings of love. In the safety of the ranch, surrounded by warmth and kindness, she felt a strange sense of belonging she hadn't known she needed. What began as a desperate plea for shelter had transformed into a connection that neither of them could ignore, a spark that promised that this Christmas might be the start of something far more magical than either could have imagined. When the storm finally began to ease, the snow outside glistened under the pale winter sun, untouched and sparkling like a sea of diamonds. Emma knew that the world beyond the ranch was calling her back, her family, her responsibilities, and the life she had left behind. But as she packed her small bag, a strange heaviness settled in her chest. She couldn't ignore the warmth she had found here, the sense of safety and comfort that Luke had offered without hesitation, and the connection that had grown between them in just a few short days. Every glance, every quiet conversation by the fire, every small gesture of kindness had planted a seed in her heart that now refused to be ignored. Luke appeared in the doorway, carrying a pair of boots he had polished earlier. His eyes met hers, and in that instant, Emma saw something she hadn't noticed before: vulnerability beneath his strong exterior, a silent hope that mirrored her own. He walked toward her, his steps deliberate but unhurried, and for a moment neither spoke. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of everything left unsaid, everything they both felt but had not yet admitted. Finally, Luke reached out, taking her hands gently in his. "Stay," he said simply, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "Not just for tonight. Stay with me. Be my wife." The words hung in the air, fragile yet powerful, and Emma felt her heart leap. She had come seeking shelter from the cold, but what she had found was something far greater: a home, a sense of belonging, and a love she hadn't dared to hope for. Tears welled in her eyes as a smile broke across her face, radiant and unrestrained. She nodded, unable to speak for a moment, overwhelmed by the intensity of the emotions coursing through her. Luke pulled her into his arms, and for the first time, she felt completely safe, completely seen and completely loved. The warmth of the fire, the glow of the winter sun through the windows, and the quiet majesty of the snow-covered world outside all seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in that perfect, timeless moment. That Christmas, what had begun as a desperate plea for help, became the beginning of a lifelong promise. The snowstorm that had trapped her had also led her to Luke, and she knew with certainty that some of life's most unexpected storms could bring the greatest blessings. In the heart of the coldest night, Emma had found love, warmth, and a home she never imagined she would call her own. And as they stood together, hands intertwined, hearts united, the world outside sparkled just as brightly as the hope and joy they now shared. The days after Christmas passed in a blissful haze, and the ranch, once a place of quiet solitude, now felt alive with laughter and warmth. Emma found herself waking to the soft glow of sunlight, filtering through the frost-kissed windows. Luke already busy in the barn tending to the animals. She would watch him for a moment, marveling at the way he moved, steady, confident, and yet gentle. A man completely at ease in the world he had built. It was a rhythm she had never known, and yet she found herself fitting into it naturally, like a missing piece finally returned to its place. Together they cooked breakfast, cleared snow from the paths, and even ventured outside to repair the fence along the edge of the property. Emma had thought she knew what hard work was in her city life, but this was different. Physical, grounding, and somehow rewarding in a way that filled her soul. Luke laughed at her fumbling attempts to handle chores, and she laughed back, feeling lighter than she had in years. Every small task became a memory, every shared glance, a spark that strengthened the bond they had forged in a single stormy night. Evenings were their favorite time. They would sit by the fire, sipping hot drinks, watching the sun dip behind the mountains, and talk about dreams, hopes, and everything in between. Emma shared stories of her past, of a life that sometimes felt too fast, too chaotic, and Luke listened with that patient, unwavering attention that made her feel truly understood. She began to see that love wasn't just about grand gestures. It was in these quiet moments, the gentle presence of someone who cared deeply and consistently. One evening, as snowflakes began to fall again outside, Emma leaned her head on Luke's shoulder, feeling the warmth of his embrace. "I never imagined my life could feel like this," she whispered, a smile tugging at her lips. Luke kissed her forehead, murmuring, "Neither did I, but I'm glad it does now." In that moment, she realized that the stormy night that had brought her to his door had not just saved her, it had transformed her life forever. The ranch, the snow, the fire, and most of all, Luke's steadfast love had given her a sense of home and a heart full of hope. Emma knew there would be challenges ahead, as in any life, but for the first time, she felt ready to face them. She had found not just a partner but a kindred spirit, someone who would stand beside her through every storm, literal or metaphorical. The snow continued to fall, quiet and gentle, a reminder of the night that had changed everything, and of the life they would now build together, one filled with warmth, laughter, and enduring love. If you enjoyed Emma and Luke's story, subscribe and turn on notifications to catch more heartwarming, tales, and magical moments.